Hello, I'm Liao and welcome back. We've been building client-side routing libraries in Svelte for the past few videos, and if this is the first video you are watching, don't worry, you can catch up with us because I've attached a link to this playlist in the description section below. You can check them out. Quick recap of what we have done so far. We have managed to do a client-side routing library that can matches your routes to a component. We have made the component to be dynamic loading. We have able to come out with dynamic parameters so that you can match different route sections, the URL path sections dynamically, and then that maps to a certain params name that you can use in the component props. And in this video, I think we've did some rough preview that what we're going to talk about in this video, because this video we're going to talk about layout. So what is layout? Maybe I give you a rough idea of what do I mean when I say about when we are going to create a layout component for our routing library. Right? So because this thing has different names in different libraries. I noticed that where some people call it a nested routes, nesting routes, layouts, basically layouts and nested routes. But to just make sure that we are aligned about what we think about when we say layouts, take a look at this example, a svelte-kit documentation site. So here, take notice that this page on the left and the right section are fixed when we try to click into other pages, right? So when I go to web standards, when I go to introduction, when I change to different page, right now I'm in routing page, and go to a layouts, go to introduction, when we change the URL on the screen, you notice that the thing on the left on this sidebar and this top bar does not change, and only the content inside changes. So you can think of it as the outside, the top bar and the sidebar, and this footer is the layout of the page where it does not change, and only when you navigate to different routes, the content, the inner part, the page itself changes. So you can think of this as the layouts that we're going to do. So we have two components. Whenever we match any routes, we can match not just one component, we can match multiple components, and the component, the outer component will wrap the inside component, which wraps the inner component, right? So you have like this, you see that this outside is like one component and then the content is the inner component. So that's why some people call it like a nested route, where outside is like one route, inner is another route where it wraps inside. So hope you roughly get the idea, and this is what we're gonna build today. Sorry to jump in, but I got an important thing to tell you, which is that if you're following along, coding along with me, the code for all this is on the GitHub repo. Link in the description. Just follow along. If you miss any steps, each changes are in individual commits. So you can just check out that commit and take a look at what you are missing. Now follow along. So of course, the first thing we're going to do is to create that layout component. Let me go over here. We can have a file called layout.svelte. So this layout component, let me have a nav bar on top. So this is the navigation. This is the navigation bar. And I can have a footer component. This is the footer. And then my content is in the middle. So if you want to nest something in, you have to pass it as like its children. So I'm going to use a slot component here. So later on when I create this component, I create two components. Later on when I create two components, like the layout component and a inner child component, maybe like the A component, I will have them look like this. So A will be inserted to the slot of the layout component. That's why I need a slot so that you know where A will be slotted into, right? So if the slot is here, after the footer, then you will see nav footer and then the A content. If its slot is here, then yeah, you get the idea of the slots element. So this is my layout. And of course, I will need to import my layout. So here I can go to my routes definition. And I will have to import. I'm gonna have to have a layout. So here in the components, we have a function that returns the a promise that resolves to a component. And for layouts, if you want to have layouts, you can have we can have a new field called layout. But you can think layout as this. Well, you can have, first of all, layouts can have many layers, right? And so in certain sense, layout is not much different as a component you see over here, because it's just one of the layers of the component. So we can change this to components instead of components as a plural, make this an array, and then we pass as many components as we want to, right? So we start from the top, which is the outermost layouts, to the innermost, from top to bottom, from the first element to the last element, right? So we can have imports like this, routes, layout dot svelte. Oops. Right, so we're gonna change our routes definition where the component is no longer there and change to a plural form, components. And we're gonna pass an array of components rather than just one component you can match to. So once you match this shop routes, then it's gonna load imports. I'm gonna load these two components, and it will create a layout component on the outside and have the shop component on the inside, right? So to make it useful, I think, or to make this change visible, I'm gonna have two routes that has layout, so that you can see that later on when we navigate to and from these two shops or items routes, you can see that the layout always stays the same. Right, so here, let me go to the item and maybe just have a link back to the shop. So shop 1, 2, 3 to shop, and in the shop svelte, I'm gonna have a link that goes to the item link. Right, so here we have it. Now we will have to change. So this, you see, TypeScript is complaining, so we have to change our type definition. Now no longer is a component, but components, which is an array of functions. So I'm gonna change this. As soon as you see that, all of them are complaining. It's incorrect. I'm gonna change it to an array. Components. Here you go, components. Let's remove this. Comment. Okay. So of course, if you come over here, even if you match something, you get an error. It's not working. Well, it's not working. We have to change. Of course, we have to fix our routing library so that it's now reading from the components, and that actually is an array now rather than just one component. So there's quite a lot of places that we need to change to adopt this. First of all, the route matching wise, after we match everything, we match the routes. I think up until this point, we are good. Yes, this is working. This is correct. And later on, when we have the match component promise, I think this not found. We have to also change this to say an array now, not found. It's to be an array. This should be a components or the array, which is this one. Of course, there's no layout for this, so this is just like itself. Right, so this is match components promise. It's an array of components. So now we can't really just call it. It's not a function anymore. Match component promises, right? So we have to use promise.all to resolve to So it's an array. It's not an array of promises, it's an array of function that returns a promise. So I have to go through each of them and call them. So I'm going to loop through and and call each and one of them, and I map it to map the return value. So this maps through the function that returns a promise and returns an array of promises. And now I can use promise.all to wait for all the promises. So when .then, what you get is an array of exports of the components. So this is the matched components. Okay, so now here we have an array of modules, right? Each of them has a default property that actually returns the components. So I would have to, okay, let me just copy this. I would have to map, hold on, match component. I'm going to call it modules first so that you know the differences. So match components will be equals to match component modules.map the module.default to give us the component itself. So now this is a list of components. So we need to figure out how we can use it. Let's see. Let's remove this. We've done this, right? We've done this. Now this part, how can we convert it to from just creating or updating one component instance to a list of components, right? So let's see whether we can have ways to create a component and pass in a slot programmatically like this, right? Like this. Let's see whether we can say, for example, new match components, first element, props, as well as the target, right? See whether we can figure out the target. Whether we can pass in a prop options called a slots like this, and then we pass in something. So I'm not quite sure. So let's check the svelte docs. So it's the docs. Svelte dev/docs, new component options, right? And we can have a target, anchor, props. We pass that, context, hydrate, intro. Okay, it's not documented anywhere. So I'm not even sure whether it's possible. So we need to figure a way to work around this, right? So how about we create a component and then we pass it. We create a routes special components and we pass all the components in. I'm not sure you get what I'm trying to say, but just like not found and loading indicator, this routing library may have a component called maybe like a main.svelte. Okay, and here we can actually take in the matched components as the props. So we have something like match components as a props. So this defaults to an array. And with this, we can say we can have say the matched so let's do a very simple one. So match component 0 equals to match component the first item, right? This one is the second one, third one. So we can go however many levels deep, and here we can use svelte component. This equals to the matched components. Match component 0, and then within itself we have the mesh component 1, and then we have mesh component 2, as well as the mesh component 3, something like that. And then of course we also need the props, right? Let match props. No, we call it the match route params. By default, it's a object. So here we can spread it. Oops. Like this. Like this. Okay. Yeah. So we can have something like this, and then we render this main component at the beginning of our routes, and then later on when we mesh a different mesh components, then we just update these props, the components and the route params, right? And we actually, this gives us a give us actually an easier way to even figure out how we can not destroy a component if it does not change, right? Remember previously we have a video where we specifically figure out, like, if the component class does not change, then we will reuse the component instance and update the props. And here, as long as the value itself, this does not change, then actually Svelte will handle the case where it does not destroy the component instance and recreate a new one. It will just reuse the component instance, but the props that is spread in is different, so it will update the props itself. So that doing it this way, it's like getting it for free without having to figure out storing the reference of the component instance, a component class, and then compare with the match component. So let's realize that. Yes. So we can first of all come over here and create a class. Let's see, on the top of the function here, we can create a class called create a component instance called the main from equals to new main. Oops. Of course, we need to import this main, so this would be main.svelte main, and we don't have the props yet. I think that's okay-ish. I think, okay, how about this? So we create a variable called the main, and then we'll only create it when we need it, right? So let's main. So here, if we don't have the main, then we create one new main. And at this point, we already know what is the mesh component and mesh routes component, right? Mesh routes params. And then our targets will be the targets. And if we have it, then we can main, and then we update the props, right? We set a new mesh components and mesh routes like this. So here we can remove all this code, and you will notice as well, we don't have to keep reference of the current component and the current component instance anymore. We just keep a reference to the main, and we use main we just update the props of the main to update new sets of components and new sets of route params. Okay, so let's see what we have now. Let's refresh. Let's go here. Let's take a look. We have the shop page, right? That has the layout. So let's go to shop 1, 2, 3. So here, this is our outer, the navigation bar and the footer, and we have our content over here. And as I click on James Bond, it goes to item 7777, which should be this one, right? We should have the layout and item.svelte as well, but But it does not. Let's see what is missing here. Whoops. Wait, this is haha. This matched haha, which is wrong. Okay. I don't know. Maybe some formatting causes this to go haywire. Format. Okay. Okay, this is still correct. Okay, let's see. Yes. So now I guess just now our params matching, somehow when we do formatting something goes wrong. That's why it's showing the wrong thing. So let's try refresh. Now we are on navigation bar. This is the component, and if we go back to the shop, the navigation bar and footer is still here, right? And remember, we like to use a timer like the one in the item where you have timer, and we use a timer to check whether the layout component, whether we destroy it or we can are we reusing it. So we can use a timer and check that. So here we have our timer. Let's import on mount from Svelte. Let's show our value, the timer value. So here in our timer navigation bar, we have a timer. And as we navigate to James Bond, you see the layout component is not destroyed. We only change this over here. And if in here, we can go to 88, 99. Can add a couple links over here. As we navigate to other pages, this nav bar still stays around. This content still stays around as we navigate, right? We don't have to keep the reference, but it still use the same component reference, and we navigate to shop. This is still here, right? So this is very useful. We didn't destroy it, because if you look at an example in the docs over here, in the svelte-kit docs, right here, as we scroll over here on the left and we jump to different sections, different pages, the scroll position is still maintained. Well, it's not really maintained, it's just that this sidebar wasn't being destroyed and recreated, so whatever internal state is still intact. No one destroys it. So I guess this is the layout component. So before we end this video, let's take a recap on the layout component again. Let's take a good look, or not this one, but the main.svelte component. Here we were lazy. We were taking the 0, 1, 2, 3 item from the arrays, and then we just create it like this. But if you have more than 4 layers of layout, if you have a lot of layouts, nested layouts, then this alone is not enough. So just before we end this, let's clean this up, make sure that it able to handle as many layouts component as possible, and then I guess we should be able to call it a day. Right, so here this is an array and an object. So of course, so first thing is that if you want to do recursive kind of components, we will have to reach out for something called a svelte self that we are able to render ourselves over here. So and actually svelte will give you a warning if this is not within an if blocks or something, then there might be something wrong, because this will infinitely recursively create itself. So of course we want to have some if case. So if the mesh components dot length is 1, if only have one item, then all we need is just this component, right? This is the item, and then this is the params. And if we have more than one, we don't need this. If we have more than one, then we're gonna have this, and we're gonna have our children inside over here, svelte self, and this will have the mesh component. Whoops, this should be a plural, S mesh components equals to mesh components slice 1, whoops, 1, and mesh component route params like this. I'm gonna pass in the same props. Let's see whether this works. Let's remove this. Let's save this. Refresh. I think it still works, right? No error, nothing. This still works. Then, which means we can come over here to our main, and we can say, for example, in this routes, this item routes. Okay, maybe the shop routes. Since we're on this page, we can have as many number of layouts we want. Save this, and you'll see that it's nested all the way within itself, right? These are all different layouts components, but we are parsing in the same, but we are nesting in one within another, right? So if you do this, it will make it much clearer. So I can have a div that wraps the slot style, div margin 8 pixel, border 8 pixel solid black, and then padding. Okay, we don't need padding. Let's save this. You see that this wraps all the way in, and we can have as many number of layers of layout we can. We don't have to worry because this component itself uses a svelte self to recursively render itself. How cool is that? Okay, so I guess that's it for this video. So we've managed to able to have our layouts component. This is a very this is a very good progress. Now from here onwards, I think we have our basic route client-side routing logic written down. It's able to handle, able to match different routes, able to intercept any link clicks, do like client-side navigation. It's able to have dynamic parameters or REST parameters, parameters matching, and as well as we can have layout components. So the next thing we're gonna switch our gears, and the next video we're gonna focus on is actually to do the file-based routing. So basically, a rough idea is that we're gonna create folders, components, arrange our files, components in a certain folder structure, and we're gonna write a script to read that folder structure and generate this file, this create routing file, this file. I'm gonna write a script to generate this file. Yeah, may not just one video, it'll be spanning across multiple videos, but we're gonna do that in the coming videos. So stay tuned.